Good morning to everyone from Enjo Sport. My name is Howard Funk. I am the sole content creator for the YouTube channel HR Funk. And 2 weeks ago, I attended the SHOT Show, and during my time there, I met Zoe from your marketing department. By the way, I apologize in that I do not speak Chinese. I hope it's not too difficult to translate the things I'm going to be saying in this video. During my conversation with Zoe, she asked me if I would be willing to evaluate the Zikka SE sight that I have here, and I actually brought it home with me from the SHOT Show. And a week ago I was able to do some tests with this optic, and I wrote this report, which I have forwarded back to you. Hopefully everyone watching this video has had a chance to look at the report, because I'm just going to be summarizing it in this video and showing you a little bit of video footage that I took while I was conducting the tests, so you can get a better idea of what I did with this sight and how it held up. When I first brought the sight home, I mounted it to a brand new Ruger RXM pistol. Obviously, it is no longer mounted to that pistol. The Ruger RXM has an interface that uses interchangeable locking lugs to allow it to accept a great variety of different types of sights without using mounting plates or anything like that. So it is a direct mount to the slide with the sight when you're using that particular pistol. I discovered right off that the screws that came with the Zikka SE, and specifically this is the Zikka SE G3 sight. This is the green 3-minute of angle dot sight. But I discovered right off that the screws that came with this sight did not correspond to the screw holes in the slide of the Ruger RXM. So I had to use different screws that I had on hand in order to mount the sight to that pistol. Fortunately, I had some screws that fit. The only issue was the screws were slightly larger diameter than the holes in the sight itself. I was able to push them down through there. It was just a tight fit, and then I was able to secure the sight to the slide of the pistol, and the mounting was very firm. There was no movement in the sight or anything else. I went out to the range and zeroed the sight, which did not prove to be too difficult, although one of the things that I noticed, and I should get a close-up of this so you can see it, is the markings for up and right that are on the sight body are very difficult to see, especially when wearing dark shooting glasses. If there was some sort of contrast with those arrows and letters to make them easier to see when someone is wearing shooting glasses, or if they're on a darkened indoor range, that would be extremely helpful. Also, I could not hear or feel any of the click adjustments as I was adjusting the windage and elevation settings to bring the point of impact of the bullets in line with the point of aim of that pistol. Still, I'm very experienced at doing this. I've done it many, many times, so I didn't have a great deal of difficulty finally getting the point of impact and point of aim to correspond. Once I had a good zero on the sight, I shot a 5-shot group, and I believe I still have the target. I'll show that to you before the end of the video. And the 5-shot group from a distance of 25 yards was very well centered in the target. In fact, there is a diagram of a heart on the target, and the shots were all touching the heart in a group that measured probably 4 inches or so center to center. So the accuracy that I was getting with this sight when first installed was good. The dot in the sight was easy to see. It was bright, even though I was out in very sunny conditions. There was snow on the range. This is wintertime where I live, so there was a lot of snow with bright sunlight shining on it, and I was able to see the dot very easily. I also found that when moving from light environments to darker environments, the auto dimming function or auto brightness setting function of the sight worked very well. It was very quick, it was very responsive, so if I moved in someplace darker, the sight would dim. When I would go back out to a lighted environment, it got brighter, and it was always easy for me to see. So the sight was working pretty well to begin with. After establishing the zero with this sight, I subjected it to a drop test. This is something I do when testing optics, and since the Zikka SE has a polymer housing, I did not drop it from a great height, and I did not drop it onto concrete because I suspected that would be more than the polymer frame of this would be able to absorb. So I turned the pistol upside down and I dropped it from a height of about this far onto a wooden tabletop. I dropped it twice straight down, so the impact was on the middle of the housing, the top portion of the housing. Then I dropped it once on either side, trying to get the sight to strike more or less at the corner to see if that was going to cause any problem with the zero setting in this optic. What happened, and I will show you a close-up of this, is during one of those drops, the lens cracked. It's cracked along the top left corner inside. Most of the lens is still visible. I can still, or at least I could, still see the dot back when it was still working. After completing the drop test, I subjected this sight to 10 cycles of the slide by forcing the optic against the edge of that wooden table and cycling the handgun with one hand. I don't personally use that technique, but there are a lot of people who will use that technique to practice one-handed manipulation of the slide in case they would have to load around into the chamber and they could only use one hand, or if they were trying to clear a malfunction and use only one hand. Because people do that, I did do that in my test. So I did 10 hand cycles of the slide to see if it was going to be still functional after that. And after doing so, I noticed that the crack or break in the slide was a little bit greater than it had been after completing the drop test. So I fired another 5-shot group on the same target to see if the zero had been maintained, and essentially it had been. 4 of the 5 shots were right in the same place on the target and about the same size group as the initial 5-shot group that I fired immediately after I had zeroed this optic. One shot was very high on the target, and I don't have an explanation for that. That could have been my fault. I might have fired a bad shot, or maybe something was a little out of adjustment with the sight, and after it was fired, it corrected itself. I don't know. All I know is there was one high shot and 4 that seemed to indicate that the sight was holding zero. After that, I came home and I proceeded to subject the sight to what I call a harsh environment test. Basically, I'm testing the limits of this optic when it's exposed to cold temperatures, when it's exposed to warm temperatures, when it's exposed to water. And because of the IPX rating of this optic, I felt that it would be okay to submerge it in water. So initially, I placed the optic, while still mounted to the pistol, the Ruger RXM, in my freezer, which has a temperature around 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and I left it there for a period of 24 hours. When I pulled the sight out of the freezer, I found that it was still working and seemed to be working properly. The cold temperature did not bother it at all. After removing the sight from the freezer, I immediately submerged it in warm water. The water was 134 degrees Fahrenheit, and I submerged it, again still mounted to the pistol, upside down in the water, and it was completely submerged, and I left it there for a period of 1 hour. When I returned after that and removed the sight from the water, there was no visible dot on the lens. And I thought that the water had gained access to the sight and rendered it inoperable. But after drying it off and handling it a little bit, I looked again and the dot had returned. So I thought perhaps there was water down inside the emitter, and when I cleaned that out with a cotton swab, that cleared away enough that I was again able to see the dot on the lens. So I prepared to go back out to the range to fire another group with this optic to see once again if it was still maintaining its point of aim and point of impact. When I got to the range, I set everything up, and again, I was going to be firing from a seated position at a bench off of a bag rest at a distance of 25 yards. But when I prepared to begin shooting, again, there was no dot visible on the lens of the sight. So I tried drying it off. I tried some different things to remediate that problem, and it still did not activate the sight. Finally, I decided to try a new battery. I had a fresh 1632 battery with me at the range, and I removed the one that had been in the Zikka SE and replaced it with that new battery, and it still did not illuminate the sight. So at that point, I believed that the sight was completely inoperable, and I was preparing to leave the range, but I took the new battery out that I had installed and replaced it with the battery that had been in there before, and when I looked in the sight, it was again working, which surprised me quite a bit. So I set things up again to prepare to test the accuracy of the sight from 25 yards. But when I sat down and started to get ready to fire, once more there was no visible dot on the lens of the sight. I cycled the slide a few times and tried to see if maybe that motion and the impact of the slide slamming forward would reactivate the dot, and it did not. As a last effort, I fired one shot out of the pistol using the mechanical sights while shooting at the target, and when the pistol came back out of recoil, the sight was illuminated. I again had a dot in the sight. So I proceeded to fire the remaining 8 or 9 rounds that I had loaded in the pistol, and the group that printed on the target was about the same size that I had fired previously when I was at the range, but it was about 10 to 12 inches lower than the original group had been. The original group was centered on the heart of that target, and now the group was down in the lower abdomen, indicating to me that the Zikka SE had lost its zero during the course of the testing that I had subjected it to. After completing the tests that I've just described, I discovered that the sight was not reliably operating. Usually it would not be illuminated at all. Periodically I could get it to illuminate, but the brightness level would fluctuate randomly, and eventually the sight would completely fade away and again be invisible in the lens. So at this point the sight is not operating reliably, and I don't believe I can get it to illuminate at all anymore. Here you can see the dot fading away, and eventually it becomes completely invisible once again. But I wanted to prepare this short video just to explain exactly what I had done, what I had subjected the sight to, and to supplement the report that I had sent you. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to test your optic.